Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where every day we explore the latest innovations and trends in technology and how they impact businesses around the world. And in today's episode, we have an exciting and insightful conversation with Eugene Le Roux, Vice President of Digital Government at NEC Corporation of America, or NEC for short. So Eugene will share his expert knowledge on digital access to government services, the role of biometrics, and the importance of a secure identity framework. So together we're going to take a deep dive into the world of digital identity and biometrics and discuss the four pillars of authentication, accessibility, interoperability, and data protection, and hopefully learn more about the challenges that governments face when implementing these frameworks and how NEC's digital identity platform is already built according to these standards, and why prioritising privacy, transparency and trust is so important to government agencies. And we'll also talk about the importance of a national framework to ensure security, accuracy and accessibility for all citizens, and how NEC's biometric solutions and cloud-based platforms align with those pillars that I just mentioned. And finally, we'll also discuss the importance of accountability in public-private partnerships, particularly in the context of digital identity platforms, and explore the potential for the kind of problems that this technology can solve. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to California, where Eugene is waiting to share his story and talk about the rapidly growing world of digital identity and biometrics. So, massive warm welcome to the show, Eugene. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm Eugene. I grew up most of my career spending in South Africa. Started out as an industrial engineer and then pivoted towards technology and various technology leadership positions. And I've recently transitioned over with NEC to California, where I now lead our ARS digital government practice. And really what we do is we provide trusted identity resolution technologies and services, and trying to solve use cases in safety, security, efficiency, and equality. Our work in safety really revolves around what we do in the law enforcement agencies, where we help them with identity resolution services to faster solve some crimes. But we also provide the platforms that enables them to do one-to-many biometric search for applicant background checks, which is really important for the private industry when they are hiring applicants into certain jobs. From a security perspective, this is kind of where the physical and the digital access world comes into play. And we see more and more a convergence of these two spaces. And this is why digital identity is already becoming so topical and exciting to talk about. We also have some applications in efficiency. This is the work that we predominantly do in the airline space, where we try to remove a friction where identity is required to automate the process from curb to gate. And lastly, from an equality perspective, there are around 1 billion citizens across the world that does not have a proof of identity. And it's been proven that if you do not have a proof of identity, you're really excluded from the economy. And we think that that's a worthwhile problem to try and solve.
Absolutely. And obviously you've got a unique perspective there, being in South Africa and then to California too. Beautiful parts of the world there. I'm curious, I've got to ask, is there anything you missed from South Africa? Because my immediate response would be, obviously, the wine is great in South Africa, but equally it's great in California. Is there anything you missed particularly about home?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of parallels between California and South Africa. And so we really enjoy the journey. Cape Town is a special city. I miss some of the friends and obviously colleagues back home. But really enjoy the opportunity that I have to play on an international stage with the business that we are involved in.
Fantastic. And one of the main reasons that I invited you on the podcast today was to talk about the importance of digital access to conventional government services, especially in today's increasingly digital society. So just to set the scene for our conversation today, can you expand on that and that importance of digital access?
Yes. I think when we're talking about digital identity or identity as such, I think a proof of identity is kind of the gatekeeper into the economy, and digital identity is really the gatekeeper into digital inclusion. And governments all across the world is, I think, thinking about how to solve the challenges that they may have in terms of increasing reach and reaching citizens that may not have the ability and or the means to get to some of the brick and mortar buildings. And as this technology evolves and where it is today, I think a lot of these typical identity government services could be solved outside of the brick and mortar establishments that exist today. But it does not need to stop there. I think when you combine your digital identity as it exists in the physical world, and you could apply that into whether that's access into buildings or into digital services or into transactions. What we really want is convergence of a single identity that you could use in multiple applications. And if I certainly believe that government has got a strong role to play around how it establishes these standards. Else we will see a very fragmented industry. If you think about loyalty systems, each retailer kind of giving you their own loyalty card. At some point, your wallet is overrun by loyalty cards, and you give up utilizing those services. And really, what we don't want is that you have a multitude of digital identities for each and every application, where essentially you have an overlay as to who you are in the real world, and that overlay as to how you share that information in the digital world or in the physical world, and should be good and decentralized.
And I'm curious, do you think biometrics will play an increasingly crucial role in implementing digital identity tools? And if it is, what are some common examples of biometric technologies currently being used by governments? Because I know it is a very thorny issue. There's lots of reasons for and against, but I'm curious what you're seeing here.
Yeah, I think biometrics really enables the digital identity and or identity industry by and large. It is the means whereby you could perform with high level of trust and authentication that you are in fact you, and how to distinguish yourself from other people. And there are various modalities in biometrics that are available. I think some of the most common ones that you also know about is facial recognition and fingerprint or palm print, iris recognition, and even acoustic. That as technology evolves, you see that these traditional biometric modalities can now be extended into non-proprietary or non-specialized edge devices. So your phone really becomes, or a kiosk could really become a reader that enables the use of this biometric technology. And at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to ensure that however you are accessing digital transactions or physical transactions, that people could authenticate you and authenticate you correctly.
And before you came on the podcast today, I was reading about the 4 key pillars: authentication, accessibility, interoperability, and data protection, and what roles those 4 key pillars play in creating a secure identity framework. Can you briefly explain each one of those, just to give the listeners an idea of how that framework pulls together?
Yes, I think when governments decide or policymakers work around coming up with a secure digital identity framework that everybody could rely upon, so that we don't have an industry that truly pulls into different directions. These 4 areas are really important, and authentication being the first is really got to do authenticating who you are, and are you who you say you are. And this is where we employ biometrics, as we've just spoken about. And all of these different biometric modalities are becoming increasingly more available and more consumable by various applications. And you can even combine the modalities to further accuracy. I think most of these biometric technologies are really accurate in the lab, but when you employ them in the real world, they are outside factors like lighting or quality that could impact the scores. But by combining different modalities, you could essentially do that user reservation a lot more efficiently. And I think by and large, from a biometrics perspective, there's a lot of standards already there, right? So we submit our algorithms for testing towards NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The results are publicized. We are very transparent in providing those to these standards organizations. And I think for by and large, that has been solved. But things that we need to think about in terms of these frameworks is things like accessibility. How can governments reach all of its citizens to drive further equality? And accessibility really in digital identities, we think, could help governments extend that reach. While traveling substantially around Africa, I had the opportunity to visit multiple government document repositories where people travel multiple days to receive a birth certificate or an ID document and have to stand in queues equally as long. And I think this is a problem worth solving, and decentralization could potentially solve some of these issues. But in doing so, leads us into the next point, which is really interoperability. And interoperability is really important for the adoption. If identity that has been issued is not interoperable, it really renders itself useless. And I think where we are today, there are really some applications where identities are being issued by governments as a digital identity. But the interoperability perspective is still missing. You've essentially moved your driver's license from your leather wallet into your digital wallet and still have to display that license in order to gain access. And that digital identity readily talk to a multitude of other relying industries. And I think that's where interoperability really becomes an important conversation. And then lastly, data protection. Data protection is of course a very big concern. We have to ensure that our systems are secure, and we like to err on the side of the individual. So the individual can control their identity and how they share it and what information they share. Because with the rise of fraud and scammers that really are out there to defraud you, I think the civilization as a whole is very concerned as to how the identity is being shared and utilized. And you have this kind of intersection point now where traditionally large companies like to collect as much data about you as possible, because that way they could individualize their offerings towards you. And you have users that really want to protect how their information lives the public world and control how that is being shared to protect their own interests. So those elements are really important.
And I suppose the big question I've got to ask here is how can a national framework based on those 4 pillars, how can that ensure that digital identity systems remain secure, accurate and accessible for all citizens and give everybody peace of mind involved? Because we all have people listening all over the world. It'd be great to hear more on that.
Yeah, I think it is important that there are standards as to how we protect that data. It is also important that the underlying platform components do support the protection of it. And like I say, at the end of the day, accessibility and interoperability is also key. What we do as NEC and the platform that we provide, really, we've been at the forefront of biometric technologies for greater than the last 3 decades, and really a trusted company in this space. Our platforms are predominantly cloud-based. We take great care in terms of our platforms in the cloud. We've made a decision as NEC that we do not wish to store the user's information. We would like to decentralize that information as much as we can when it comes to digital identities. But there are applications where governments need to centrally store some data, like the national identity. And even if you're talking about the applicant background check, like that information needs to be refreshed and searched continuously. And therefore, it's really important to ensure that those platforms are safe and secure. We take a lot of input from government. If FBI comes up with standards and procedures which we align to and comply, and overlay that with our own information security standards in order to protect this information.
And that brings us nicely up to NEC's digital identity platform. So can you tell me a bit more about that, how it aligns with those 4 pillars of the security identity framework, and also what makes it stand out and why is it trusted by so many government agencies around the world?
Yeah, I think NEC has been in the industry for a really long time. And from a biometrics perspective, we have been supplying solutions to governments for a long time, whether those are national identity systems or whether those are ABIS systems or border control applications, as well as driver's license applications. So we kind of grew up in the biometrics world and are really strong in authentication. Our vision as a company is really to provide solutions that is to the benefit of society. And so we work very hard in terms of our accessibility as to how we combine our cloud-based applications and federate access to the edge, and how do we secure that through encryption. And interoperability for adoption is really important. Our platforms are open. We have APIs that you could interface to, securely interface to. But yeah, indeed, government plays a very important role in terms of that standardization, so that the adoption is really ubiquitous. And from a data protection perspective, NEC has been in data protection and in other business units for a long while as well. And as I said, we comply to a lot of the standards that CGIS puts out there, and we has embedded really security as part of our platform and as part of our development cycle, and we continuously for vulnerabilities and update our systems for those vulnerabilities.
Before you came on the podcast today, I was doing a little research on you, and I saw in your blog that you explored government's role in the growing digital ID market, and also you discussed the need for a federal framework to ensure interoperability and better privacy standards, etc. So can you elaborate on the challenges that rise in the absence of such a framework? Because I think that really highlights the importance of it, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing, if you do not have a framework, is you have this fragmentation and inconsistency, and that leads to lower adoption and lower trust. So when you have a framework and it is open and shared, then a lot of the privacy concerns and security concerns could be addressed. Things like cyber security vulnerabilities is always going to be important as well. So these are some of the challenges that we face. And at the macro, I think it's hard enough for governments to standardize on a framework, and so how do intergovernment collaboration work? Cross-border collaboration really becomes another topical point, because the world is getting smaller and smaller. And I've recently transferred into the US and really had to make a standing start in terms of my identity history in the United States. And so now today, not a lot of the interoperability exists. Essentially, you start with your credit record from ground zero again. And so in future, if we truly solve this problem, I think we have to think about cross-border collaboration.
And just to bring to life everything we're talking about here, can you share some success stories or maybe case studies of governments successfully implementing digital identity solutions based on that 4-pillar framework that we've talked about? I appreciate you're probably limited as to what you can share, but is there anything you can?
Yeah, it's limited in terms of the customers that we specifically work for, as I would need consent for those. But I mean, we work with multiple across the world. NEC is a global organization, and there are some of these countries that have made a start, and some more successful than others, and some state and local governments that has made a start in the US. Some are still in progress, and I think we're really at the start of this process right now. There's a lot of talk. We participate in a lot of RFIs and try and provide some thought leadership around this area. But the whole convergence of a physical identity and a digital identity, I think is something that governments are trying to figure out at the moment.
And again, for anybody listening around the world, what do you think are the major roadblocks governments might face when adopting digital identity solutions? And what are the best ways of overcoming those challenges?
Yeah, the privacy and security is probably the first that comes to mind. Citizens across the world have different levels of trust of their government. And so transparency is going to be really important from governments across the world in terms of how that data has been generated, how it's being shared, or how it's been protected. So I think privacy and security is going to be one of the adoption challenges that we will face. A lot of countries across the world will have some technological infrastructure challenges. Some of the base infrastructure may not exist in order to fully capitalize on the growth of digital identities, and with that, some budgetary constraints. I think governments need to figure out what services they could provide to reliant agencies and or institutions which they could monetize in order to be able to support these platforms and the issuing of these digital identities going forward. If we don't get the interoperability and the standardization right, then user adoption might be low, and we've already seen this in countries across the world where national ID systems have been launched, and And even in the physical identity world, there's been really no adoption in these services because in many cases there's just no need to go through the trouble of getting an identity. And what we really need to drive is through the standardization where this digital identity could be utilized to give you that access into the economy and this digital inclusion.
And you mentioned a great word there, transparency, and I agree. I think it's so important. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of distrust in certain parts of the world, especially when governments and private companies are working together. So that transparency is so important. So any tips on how governments and private companies can work together, drive innovation in the digital identity space while also ensuring data protection and privacy for all of its citizens? Because that's the ideal destination. I wonder if there's anything you can share around that.
Yeah, I've seen public-private partnerships work, and I've seen public-private partnerships fail. So, and there are various reasons for each of those. But and I think transparency is key. In some instances, governments need to rely on the private sector in terms of driving technology adoption and bringing those skills to a cause in order to solve a problem. But clearly, we need to ensure that private companies does not take advantage of the position that is given by government and therein, I think some of the failures that has happened in private-public partnerships across the world. And I think it comes down to establishing clear standards and guidelines as to how these should work and continually encouraging this transparency and accountability, practically.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today. I'll add a link to your white paper on how biometrics can safeguard digital ID for government agencies. But for anybody listening around the world, is there anywhere else you'd like me to point them to, whether they want to dig a little bit deeper on what we talked about or contact your team, etc.? Is there a URL you'd like to point everyone to?
Yeah, I can find NEC Corporation of America at www.necamnicam.com. So it's www.necam.com. We also have a social media and LinkedIn profile as NEC Corporation of America. You can go and search that up. We have the Twitter profile as NEC. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Eugene Le Roux Connect.
Well, some big words we mentioned today, especially from a citizen's point of view, which is things like trust, prioritizing privacy, transparency. And it's great to hear that that's exactly what you're doing there with NEC's digital identity platform, and one of the big reasons that it's trusted by numerous government agencies around the world. But just a big thank you for talking about it in a language that everyone can understand and helping everyone make sense of it and the sophisticated technology that makes it possible. Thanks for joining me today, Eugene.
Thank you very much, Neil.
So I hope you all gained a deeper understanding of the importance of those 4 key pillars: authentication, accessibility, interoperability, and data protection, especially when creating a secure identity framework. And yes, as we move towards a more digital society, I think it's so crucial for governments to work closely with trusted partners and that can help develop and implement secure, accurate, and accessible digital identity solutions that do prioritise the privacy and the needs of all citizens, because without it, you end up going down a very rocky road. But I'd love to hear your opinions about anything we discussed today. It's a subject that will impact each and every one of us, wherever you're listening in the world. And yes, there are things we need to navigate around, but I'd love to hear your insights and experiences on this. So please keep your questions coming in over to techblogwriter@outlook.com. If you'd like to come on the podcast, show a different side of the story, or just talk about this in more detail, we can do that too. But other than that, keep those messages coming in. I'll be back again tomorrow with another episode. But thank you for listening today, and until next time, don't be a stranger.